Hi, I'm Ramesh Nithyendran, and this is my installation called Mudmen, which is a special commission for the National Gallery of Australia. This installation consists of 5 major works. They're the biggest works I've produced, I guess, in my career. It comprises of about 2 tons worth of clay, like concrete, cement, rubber hoses, snakes, shells, teeth, porcelain, twine, Indian human hair, you name it, it's there. Big Idol is the centerpiece of the installation, and when I was kind of conceiving the installation, I really wanted to consider the audience experience, thinking about how they'd move through the space, and I had this kind of wacky idea about this central icon in the middle framing the rest of the work. So thinking about how lots of monuments, and especially religious monuments, are framed in spaces. They're often tall, they're often arms stretched out. So the biggest kind of footprint the human can make is legs out, arms out, tall as possible, and then kind of elevated on this plinth. So I guess the work that I've made, or the installation I've made, is site-specific in the sense that I'm responding to the, I guess, the cultural and social and political context of what the National Gallery of Australia is, what it means in the context of creating our national identity and our cultural landscape. And what I find in many, say, large-scale state institutions and I guess national institutions, particularly in the West, is that there seems to be a slightly dated approach in the way that art from other regions are framed, and they're often racialised or positioned in the context of specific regions. And with this, there's often this faith-based positioning of art, especially from Asia. My parents migrated here from Sri Lanka in 1989 when I was 1, and their marriage meant that my mum was Catholic and my dad was Hindu. So, and diasporic, with the diasporic family and community, you'd often go to multiple faith-based institutions, which are the temple and the church, in more specific terms. And I guess from a very young age, I had this like fear of going to the church, or just on a, not even from a philosophical level, I found it really scary because it smelled a bit funny, and there were all this like pain and violence and gore like framed all over the architecture and the pictures and the imagery, and it was all about guilt and routine and sitting and standing and being nicely dressed. But then we'd go to the temple in Westmead and we'd take our shoes off, and there'd be chickens and peacocks and colourful and flowers and food. And I was always like really jealous that I'd have to go to like scripture classes, and my cousins were like having a great time like at the temple. So I think although I'm an atheist and like quite confident in that position, I'm exploring these religions from a cultural perspective. So there's no, I guess, religious worship thing going on. It's all secular. What is really interesting to me is positioning the work within an urban context. I guess this idea of tagging it's a way of claiming space, it's a way of contesting space, and it's kind of interesting because it's also not a subversive act anymore, as like lots of middle class rich, specifically boys, seem to like be really great at graffiti. So I thought it was kind of really interesting to have this graffiti kind of tagging element within the context of all these ideas. Within lots of the sculptures that I presented, there is this heavy kind of found object component to them, and incorporating found objects amongst these handmade works. So really kind of looking at these tensions between kind of handmade, artisanal with mass-produced throwaway culture. And I guess like often, when I work with kids, a lot of the time introducing them to contemporary art, I ask them what they think an art shop is, and they'll tell me, and I say my favourite art shop is eBay, and then that really kind of shifts their minds a lot. And kind of it's true, like it's kind of stressful to go into like Blackwattle pottery supplies and buy all that heavy stuff, but eBay is actually enjoyable. Like you can find anything on eBay. When I was responding to this space, I wanted to think about what an Asian collection of the future might look like. What does it mean for Australia to be positioned as a Western society whilst being in the Asia Pacific region geographically?